I'm sorry, I had a bit of a issue there with muting. So, housekeeping items. Our webinar is being recorded. We will send this out post-event, and question and answer will take place at the end of the webinar, but please feel free to place any questions you may have in the chat box at any point, and we will get to them as appropriate. And I'm going to hand it over to our presenter. Thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, Lindsay. So, welcome everyone. Today we're going to talk about, business disaster recovery, business continuity, backup and recovery processes. So let's start our conversation around what are some modern availability challenges that we have in our environments today. So as an example, things like having multiple DR solutions or backup solutions that are not interconnected. So we may want to consolidate these down to a single tool or service or system to be able to more easily and more effectively manage our BCDR needs. Our environments are complex. We're not just running in a Windows environment. We have other things like Hyper-V, VMware, physical Linux systems. So it's not just a Microsoft world. It's all of these pieces put together in our data centers, traditionally speaking. And our business critical applications can be quite complicated, right? There could be multiple services and components and pieces that are interconnected together that are dependent on each other. And if one of those pieces goes down, we need to ensure that our systems, our services, whether they're internally facing or whether they're externally facing, are still operational so that our business is able to continue. And maybe we want to use or approach a hybrid type of model and use some of the services that are available in the cloud, but it can be complicated to migrate our established systems and our workloads into that space. So kind of how do we do this in an effective manner to make this work? Well, when it comes to disaster recovery specifically, there's other unique challenges around that specific area. So challenges like needing multiple solutions to protect our environment. Maybe we have multiple systems and not one solution can protect all of that. So how do we manage that? That can get rather complicated and cumbersome to manage. Perhaps our current solutions do not support all of our business and mission critical systems. So there's a bit of a gap and a risk there where most of our systems may be protected for a DR scenario, but maybe not all of them. So how do we bridge that gap so that we know that those mission critical systems are properly protected and will be operational if there were a disaster scenario declared? If we need to implement a secondary data center, then this can be a very complicated and a very costly thing to do. Managing two physical environments, the cost in building or co-location can be quite high depending on what we're trying to achieve. And what about if we want to test our disaster recovery playbook? That can be difficult, and it can potentially affect our live production environment, our live data. So we need to be able to validate our disaster recovery playbook without negatively, adversely affecting production. And finally, we have the risk of possible data loss and errors and corruption when failing over to a secondary site. It's interesting that the main cause of the IT quote-unquote disasters are mostly due to operational failures, not actual literal natural disasters. Things like power failures in the data center, hardware issues, network issues, software stuff, even human error has a bigger effect than the traditional actual natural disasters. So how do we account for all of these types of effects that can cause an IT disaster to ensure that our environment, our business and critical systems are protected, and we can still continue to operate as a business and as an entity. So we're talking about Azure in relation to availability, but why? Why can we look to Azure to help with this? Well, within Azure itself, the disaster recovery and backup solutions are built into the platform and the environment. So it's a third-party component. It's not a bolt-on add-in. It's part of the underlying platform fabric of Azure itself. Kind of like a first class, if you will. Azure itself supports protecting environments that are not just Microsoft based. So it supports protecting VMware environments, Linux systems, even physical environments directly. So we can be able to leverage Azure as that environment to protect any type of system that we have in our current traditional data centers. It makes it easy to start implementing a hybrid strategy by replicating our workloads from our traditional on-premises data center into Azure, and then through this we can then start to leverage some of the other Azure services to further enhance our business, our services, and our platforms. Think about the power in machine learning and cognitive analytics and business intelligence. Think about all these different pieces that Microsoft has a lot of breadth in and depth in, that we can tap into these additional Azure-based services to enhance our products, to give us that competitive edge and make our products and our services better for that. So when we talk about disaster recovery and backup, it's actually two pieces together, BCDR. We need the disaster recovery for when our applications have a failure with the app itself, so that we can run them in Azure or in a secondary data center. So these solutions work better together. The DR is for those application type of failures, failing over to one site or another or into Azure. And then the backup piece is used in relation to restoring corrupt or lost data. So these are two pieces of the same puzzle. In Azure, we have the Azure Recovery Services solution, which combines these two components into the same service. And that makes it easier to have a full, complete, end-to-end DR solution for our environments. So with the Azure Recovery Services solution, we can leverage it to protect and extend our data center. Starting on the left, Azure Site Recovery, that first piece, ASR for short. We can use that to protect our business critical applications, but we can also use that tool as a migration platform. So perhaps we are looking at that hybrid model to extend stuff up into Azure and then leverage some of those other services. We can use the ASR solution to replicate the systems over and then fail them over into Azure, and like a lift and shift type of model. On the right, we have Azure Backup. So Azure Backup can be used obviously as a backup solution, and it effectively replaces our need for tape storage and tape infrastructure. And if we're using any Azure IaaS virtual machines running up in Azure directly, we can very easily back those systems up quite frequently and quite easily in the same solution. So really, Azure Site Recovery gives us a complete DR solution. Not only does it support multiple types of environments, like we discussed, Hyper-V, VMware, and physical environments, it also supports Windows and Linux OSs. In fact, it's even, it even works with other cloud providers like AWS. So you can effectively protect and migrate your workloads that may be running in AWS into Azure. So if there's an outage in another cloud provider and your critical systems are running there, well, you can fail that over and have that running in Azure in a matter of minutes, and your business continues to operate as it needs to. ASR also supports the site-to-site protection, so site A to site B, and it helps to orchestrate or automate the replication and failover between these two sites. So we see in the diagram the example of VMware to VMware or physical systems, or VMM to VMM if you're using Hyper-V and a system center type of platform. So it's not just going from our traditional on-premises data centers into Azure specifically. It can still have the mitigation and coordination between our two physical data centers if we already have two or multiple running in our area. So when we replicate and migrate workloads, it's really used as an extension of our data center. The recovery services solution is on demand, and it empowers us to automate the failover, which we'll talk in a little bit more detail a little later on. We can even use the solution for testing and migrating. So we can see a couple different examples in the diagram here where, heavy lifting with SAP, Oracle, SQL Server stuff that are usually fairly powerful systems, can be complicated. Those are still validated by the Microsoft Teams as a supported first-class workload within this ASR solution. So ASR gives us multiple scenarios that we can work against, but really through one solution. And this is where the power comes in. With ASR, we get things like automated replication. We get control over our recovery point objective, so RPO, and recovery time objective, RTO. So how many points in time do we want to be able to go back if we needed to do a failover? And recovery time objective, how quickly can we ensure that our systems are back up and operational to ensure that our business continues as normal? We have planned and unplanned failover with recovery plans. And this is actually quite powerful because you can test your DR playbook, your runbook, and be confident that the solution works before a disaster actually occurs. So in these the recovery plan playbooks, you can even include customizations like manual actions if you need a human to actually go and check something or do something manually. You can add custom scripts or Azure automation runbooks for PowerShell and automate things like DNS updating, IP address changes, stuff like that, so that you can really end-to-end, if you want, automate your full DR recovery solution so that at a click of a button, your entire workload or your workloads and environment is operational as expected and validated. What's also powerful about the ASR solution is that you can create on-demand copies of your production environment, and you can do this for testing. So think about the scenario where you need to roll out patches. Maybe it's the Windows patch level, maybe it's a new version of the app code, and you want to be confident before rolling something out into production. So some organizations will have dev, test, QA, UAT segregation or domains to test against. But how many times going through those channels, even in a delivery cycle model, that once it goes to QA, UAT, and then goes into prod, it might not work exactly the same way because QA and prod or UAT and prod might not be 100% the same. So with ASR, you can initiate a test failover, which would create a copy of what's already been replicated into Azure, spin up a virtual machine or multiple machines, depending on how you've configured it, and be able to test against those directly, a literal copy of your production data without affecting production. Test those Windows patches, test the new version of the code, and validate that, yes, these will operate, there's no negative effects to the system, and you can be that much more confident and ready to deploy that into production. So what's supported from an application stand with the solution? Well, Microsoft has tested many different scenarios and applications and continue to enhance and add to the solution. So we see in the table or in the chart here the key differentiations between Hyper-V and VMware, what's been validated. Now these have been validated by the product teams from a Microsoft standpoint as operational and works with this solution. And we see things like SAP, Linux, Oracle, things that obviously are not Microsoft technologies, but have been tested with the solution by Microsoft as supported. And we see there's still things that are in the works as labeled coming soon. So they're continually adding and enhancing the solution even further on nearly a daily basis. So we're going to talk a little bit now with the other side of the coin, the other piece of the puzzle is Azure Backup. So we talked about Azure Site Recovery as the recovery piece of that puzzle. Now the backup is the joining side of that. Whether we're using an on-prem environment in our traditional data centers, maybe we have a hybrid type of environment, or we're even using IaaS virtual machines in Azure. Azure Backup can be used across all of these scenarios. It integrates with things like System Center and Data Protection Manager, and it also has its own standalone platform for installation that's geared towards small and medium businesses. And as mentioned before, if we're running IaaS virtual machines, we can directly back up those systems in Azure as well. So what do we get out of Azure Backup? Well, it gives us a long-term retention. So think as a replacement for your tape storage. Some industries have specific requirements for data retention, like healthcare, legal, and manufacturing. And Azure Backup has a retention period of up to 99 years. So if you have to keep backups on tape for 5, 7, or even 10 years, how many tapes would that be? How hard would it be to retrieve data from the right tape? Azure Backup greatly simplifies this need and this approach to make it a much more streamlined process for even the long-term retention needs. So what about cost? Because that's always a factor. Well, when you compare things like software licensing, maintenance, off-site storage, and things that factor into the tape side of the world, cloud-based backup can be significantly cheaper. So how does it work? Well, we're going to take this example here of an Azure IaaS virtual machine, and it has an agent installed on it. And that's used to take a snapshot of the disks that are attached to that system, which are then transferred to this backup vault. And that's effectively how it works on multiple levels. So just to quickly give an idea of how New Signature ties into all of this in presenting this today. New Signature is a full-service technology company and a premier Microsoft solution provider. The values that Signature was founded on continue to drive our success and our commitment to delivering a great customer experience. Yes, we're very technical, but our focus is on the experience for our customers to ensure that that's optimal and very positive. We focus from a technology perspective to deliver the full life cycle of services across the entire Microsoft stack. So whether you're in an on-premises environment, whether you're in the cloud, or in a hybrid type of deployment, New Signature is able to help you understand the value, realize the benefits, and mitigate any of the risks along the way. So we see some of the technologies that we specialize in listed here. So what New Signature has done through the ASR technology is developed a recovery experience and provides a comprehensive recovery plan and a team of experts to help create, update, maintain, and execute that recovery plan. In the event where recovery is required in a real DR type scenario, New Signature's highly skilled team of experts are available 24/7 to take the call. So we're able to utilize the best-in-breed cloud services within Azure using the ASR technology so that you can rest assured that if there's a problem, that your application, your mission-critical systems will be available in case your data center is having an actual disaster scenario. So we wrap our recovery services to monitor, to give reporting on statuses of replication, even mitigating and resolving any issues within that service. Our service offerings are broken into 3 pillars: professional services, managed services, and cloud applications. So just briefly, professional services consist of our consulting capabilities. So it's divided into 2 practice areas: platform and productivity, and custom design and development. Our managed services include our advisory and operational services that we provide on a recurring basis to our customers. So think of that as our 24/7 operations, our NOC, monitoring, managing, mitigating risks, and dealing with remediation and advanced administration items. And our cloud applications are built on packaged SaaS offerings that we've developed on top of the Azure Cloud Platform and productivity technologies. So New Signature prides itself not only on implementing stellar solutions, but we also set up our customers for success and ensure that they know how to use their new tool sets, solutions, and products. We don't just click a few buttons and then leave it at that. We ensure we have that knowledge transfer and that you are comfortable with that new solution being implemented. So we have a few minutes now. If there's any Q&A, please either feel free to come off mute if that's possible, or just type your questions into the chat window there, and I'll be happy to answer them. And if we don't get to all of them, or if you have questions later on, please feel free to contact New Signature at the information provided.
Great. Thank you, Aidan. We will wait just a couple minutes to see if you have any questions, but do feel free to email us the questions if you don't feel comfortable asking them here, or if you get off the phone and decide that you did have something. I do see we have one person typing, so I will let that question go through. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So the question, in case anyone's dialed in, someone would like to see the cost slide again. So let me just back up a couple here to find that for you. Oh, there it is. So there you go. We'll keep that up for a few minutes. One thing I forgot to mention is that New Signature, in partnership with Microsoft, has developed a pilot program around this ASR technology, in which Microsoft funds a third of the project cost, New Signature funds a third of the project cost, and you as the customer only pay a third, which is approximately $5,000. And what that gets you is a complete end-to-end setup of the ASR solution, the Azure tenant, doing replication of up to 20 systems, even test failover, plus 6 months free of our recovery experience managed service on top of that. So if you're interested in that as well, to see a bigger pilot versus a POC and majority funded by Microsoft and New Signature, please do feel free to reach out to us.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, if you have further questions, do feel free to email us. If you have any other needs, let us know. Thank you so much for your time, and you will receive this recording after we send up the follow-up within 48 hours. Thank you.